5 months after the end of the last agreement with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the country is turning back to the multilateral financier seeking help to deal with the economic fallout from COVID-19. Forecasts show the country's economy could contract significantly this year, with job losses and production shrinking as people take precautions to prevent the contraction of COVID-19. Now, in light of that impact, Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke wrote to the IMF chief yesterday requesting assistance through the fund's Rapid Financing Instrument, RFI. This comes after the IMF last week substantially increased the amount of money its members can access through the facility in an effort to help them deal with issues arising from COVID-19. Now, Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke now joins us live via Zoom to give us some more details on the reason for going back to the IMF at this time. Dr. Clarke, good evening. Welcome to Primetime News.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Okay, good. First of all, Dr. Clarke, going back to the IMF, we just completed an arrangement with them in which we were required to meet several precautions, or rather preconditions. Tell us, will the same be required if we are considered favorable for this new request under the RFI program?
No. Jamaica is requesting access to the RFI from a position of strength. We have macroeconomic stability. We have a very large pool of reserves. We have lots of financing options. The purpose of accessing this RFI, and just to be clear, if we weren't going from a position of strength, we wouldn't be going for an RFI. We would have to go for another instrument that is geared towards countries in serious trouble. The purpose of doing this at this time is to just make sure we are prepared. You know, I give you the analogy of a hurricane that you see gathering in the Eastern Caribbean. You don't know if it's going to come and hit you directly, but even when you see it in the Eastern Caribbean, you go to the supermarket, you get a tin of bully beef, you get some tin of condensed milk and flour and cornmeal, and you stock up. But that's a metaphor for what we're doing here. We are accessing resources, accessing financing that we will have available in our central bank should the need arise. And this financing under the Rapid Financing Instrument would come without conditions and would come without quarterly reviews and quarterly tests.
Okay. All right, we understand you have asked for 100% of our quota. That works out to about $500 million US. Will that be enough to deal with the crisis we are facing? And what exactly can that money be used for?
Well, so just to be clear, the IMF only last week doubled what was available under this Rapid Financing Instrument. Once they doubled the amount that was available, it became attractive because it represents funds that we can access, we can draw down on and have that cash sitting right here in our central bank without any conditions and without any quarterly tests going forward. Now, what we want, is we have two sides of the equation. We have the fiscal side, which is the revenues and expenditure of government, and we have the monetary side, which is having resources that we can pay our external bills as they come due. On the fiscal side, with revenues and expenditure, Jamaica has a lot of options. We have options because we have cash that we're sitting on that we had programmed for an accelerated pay down on debt. We have access to domestic financing here in Jamaica. Our institutions have funding availability. They can lend to the government, and Jamaica has maintained its credit rating, so that financing source is available. And we also have financing sources from multilaterals, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the World Bank. So we have lots of avenues and options on our fiscal side. On the monetary side, we have assets, but we want to make sure that we have assets in foreign currency. And we need assets in foreign currency because tourism receipts are now at zero and are at zero for a few months at least. And remittances, due to the fact that economies in our diaspora markets are under pressure and unemployment has skyrocketed in those markets, we can expect remittances to be down by large double digits. So we want to make sure that in that context, we are prepared and we have a pool of foreign currency reserves or foreign currency resources that we can add to the over $3 billion of resources that we have at the central bank that put us in an even more comfortable position. So, this is to prepare and to be prepared due to the uncertain duration of this pandemic.
Okay, now there are various scenarios of how badly our economy could be affected by COVID-19. From where you sit, Dr. Clark, how are the numbers looking so far in terms of employment and revenue fallout? And how will this fund help to mitigate what we are facing?
Well, so we have already seen various projections. We've had projections from our own central bank, projections from the Fitch rating agency, projections from the IMF, and they range from, so far, from an economic contraction of 3% of GDP all the way to 5.6% of GDP. No one knows for sure. These are all forecasts. But what is certain is that Jamaica will experience a massive economic shock, massive economic contraction, like many countries around the world. And what we're expected to experience, the IMF forecast suggests, is in line with the average for Latin America and the Caribbean, and ahead of or better than many other countries, many other peer countries in the region. What we can sort of expect in the near future is that, as you suggested, we're going to have revenues that are lower than we would have otherwise experienced, and we'll have expenses that have to do with this particular pandemic, responding to the health and economic pressures that the pandemic brings.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Clark. And before you go, how soon can we expect to, if we're looked on favorably, how soon can we access this cash?
So the rapid financing instrument would be available to Jamaica in a matter of weeks. So, by early May, we can expect to have this cash sitting in our central bank. And again, we're not in a point of, need at this point. As I said, we have over $3.6 billion of gross reserves in the central bank. But it's important when you are strong, it's important to prepare for what might be on the horizon. So this is a preemptive move to ensure that we have resources on hand to deal with the economic effects of a pandemic that is of uncertain duration.
Okay, good. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Clark, Finance Minister. Thank you for your time. Janella?